Hi, g'day. My name's SteveBarker. I'm a leadership coach and human behavioral specialist. And I've come on to share with you today a presentation that I delivered at the BNI Business Network International National Conference in Cairns in 2024. And I've been given the feedback that it's extremely valuable and will serve anybody with regards to leadership or relationships, whether you are in a business or whether you are in a community, or even if you're in a family or a team environment. Now, this presentation I've been sharing for free because people have said to me it's really valuable and it helps people to be able to understand the ripple effects of their leadership decisions. Now, when I talk about leaders, what I'm talking about is the ability to influence another human being. Now, it doesn't matter whether you are in a leadership role or a position. If you are influencing or have influence over another person, you are in a leadership role. That is the rawest definition of leadership, is the ability to influence another human being. And this happens in our team environments. This happens within our work environments. Like I say, you may not be in a leadership role. I went into a business to help develop a team there, and one of their best leaders actually turned out to be the cleaner because she had the best influence over the team. It was amazing to see. So it doesn't really make any difference whether you have a role or a title or not. If you are influencing other people, then I hope that you will get something from this presentation. Now, as you can see from the title, it's called The Leadership Revolution, that's improving families, workplaces, and communities right now. And that's the reason why I'm sharing this, because I hope that inside this presentation, you'll find understandings, hints, tips, strategies, things that you can take into your world so that you can influence people in a positive way and reduce a lot of stress and anxiety that happens within these organizations. So let's jump in. Let's get into the presentation. So this was me delivering at the conference in Cairns. Yep, that was me doing my thing. And this is where the presentation starts. So leadership has ripple effects. Now, I discovered this when I was working as a youth worker looking after kids in out of home care. So they've been removed from their family environment for whatever reason for their own safety. And one of the things that I started to realize there was a ripple effect that happened during their life that had led them to be where they were. And a lot of the time, much of the time, it had to do with the relationships between them and their parents, but then the relationship that their parents had with their team leaders at work and the frustrations that started there. And this is the ripple effects that we're now seeing in society. So let's start with you having a bad day at the office, having a bad day within your team, having a bad day within your community, your environment, your family, whatever it is. There's frustration, there's miscommunication, there's misunderstanding, there's misappropriation of work. You feel like you're doing more work than other people, or maybe boundaries or standards are not being upheld. They're being swept under the carpet. Whatever it is, you come home from work feeling extremely frustrated. You're drained. You're tired. And what do? We take out our frustrations on those that we love the most. In this case, it's our family. And our families then start to suffer because we're too busy arguing. Now, the ripple effect is if we have little people in our world, then our kids do not get the attention that they need. They don't get the connection. They don't feel the significance. Now, these are human needs. This has been proven over and over again in scientific studies that if we don't feel significant, if we don't feel heard and seen, then we will go somewhere else to get that attention. It's just part of the core needs of human beings. So if we've got young people who are not getting the attention they need at home, where will they go and get it? Well, they'll go to the next place, which is school. When they're at school, they muck up, they mess up, they disrupt because that's the way that they get their bucket of attention field. Now, they generally do this in an unresourceful way. This means that our teachers and teachers' aides end up becoming more counselors and more youth workers than they do teachers. And ultimately, we end up with a dysfunctional society because we have people who haven't had the best education that they could have had because the teachers aren't able to do this. This is the ripple effects of our leadership. And I'm talking about people in the workplace, how this ripples out into society. And we see it day in, day out. It's just that we don't put the chain together. But this is what's happening. It's happening all the time. I'm sure you've experienced it where you've had a frustrating day at work and you've come home, you're tired, you're irritable, and the next thing you're taking it out on your partner, you're taking it out on the dog, you might even shout at your kids. What happens then? What's the ripple impact of that on that relationship? And this is the one that we follow with the youth of today. They become dysfunctional in the in the school environment and also in communities, and we end up with the society that we currently have. Now, this is the ripple effect. We can change this. We can change this today by thinking about our leadership choices and our leadership decisions. So you might only have a small sphere of influence in your environment. But it doesn't matter, because if you make one better leadership decision today, that might reduce the amount of frustration for somebody else. That might send them home in a better mood. And as we see at the end of the presentation, the ripple effect changes massively. So one of the problems that we have in the modern day work environment, and I'm going to focus on the work environment, is that we have all of these different generations. We've got these 5 different generations. Now, the silent generation, we're not seeing so much of now, but they're being replaced by Gen A, Generation Alpha. They are the young and up and coming people. So as much as the silent generation are now leaving the work environment, we're starting to see the younger generation, Generation Alpha, coming in. Now, each one of these different generations all want to be led in different ways. We know baby boomers are, very diligent, but very structured and very authoritarian in their approach. Gen Xers, very independent. The millennials and the Gen Zs, they are very open to new ideas. They use lots of technology. They are embracing flexible work environments. So as a leader, we can't just treat these people the same. We have to lead them in different ways. We have to understand them. And I'm going to share an insight at the end of this presentation around the millennials and the Gen Zs. And it is just an insight because this is a module all on its own. So when I'm teaching or I'm coaching people in leadership or workplace culture, this is a presentation that lasts for an hour and a half, all about how do we work and how do we lead the 5 different generations in our workplace. So we'll come back to that. But this is part of the problem that we have at the moment because of the different ways that people go about doing their normal day-to-day business. Now, at the moment, we're starting, or we're experiencing, we're not starting, it's been going on for a while now. We're starting to see we're experiencing a merry-go-round of people chopping and changing jobs. Business owners have been coming to me now for years saying, how do I retain my team members? Why do they keep leaving? Why do they keep coming along, starting an apprenticeship or start working with me? I invest into them, and then all of a sudden they jump ship and they are heading off again for a different job, a different career type. What is going on? So this is part of the problem that we have. At the moment, 9.5% of the Australian workforce changed their job last year. 9.5%, that's nearly 10% of the Australian workforce changed their job. That's roughly 1.3 million people. That's a huge churn. And when we start to look at it, the churn, the disruption that it has within teams starts to, also impact the workplace culture. But why are they leaving? Well, because as of 2024 in February, when I did this presentation, and the figures are roughly about the same, there was over 363,000 job vacancies. So 364,000, for want of a better description, job vacancies out there, and unemployment is currently 4%, which means that anybody who wants to work, anybody who can work, anybody who wants a job already has a job. And as we said, there was 364,000 job vacancies available. Is it any wonder that people are changing their jobs? Because there's so much choice. Why wouldn't they? But let's start to look at why they want to leave in the first place. Because what we've currently got is we've got an employee market, which means the employee holds all the cards and the employer has to dance to a certain tune if they want to get good quality employees in their team. So why are people not sticking around? What's the 5 reasons people are leaving their jobs? And this is based on a report from Forbes. And this is real life figures. The biggest reason why people leave a workplace is because of the toxic culture that is happening within a workplace. Then we look at salary. People leave because they want more money. That makes perfect sense. Number 3, poor leadership. 4, poor work-life balance. And number 5, as I said, the younger generation are all over this flexible remote working environment. And the older generation, which includes my generation, Gen X, Gen X, we are inflexible with that thought process because we were brought up with the 9 to 5. We were like, I just want to start work at 9, finish at 5. That's how it's always been. And then all of a sudden we got people saying, well, could I start at 7 o'clock in the morning and then work through till 8, take my kids to school and then come in at 9 and then finish at 3 and do some work later on in the evening? For a lot of the baby boomers and the Gen Xers, they struggle getting their head around this. And this is where I help Gen Xers, baby boomers, and Gen Zs and millennials help grow their emotional intelligence skills to help deal with this new way of leadership. So these are the top 5 reasons why people are leaving work environments. So we have to ask ourselves, what one thing that all of these things have in common? And I want you just to think about that, just whilst I take a quick slurp of my tea and wet my whistle. What do you think the one thing is that links all of these? And I'll give you a clue. The answer's down in the bottom right-hand corner. The one thing that's in common is leadership. Now, if we get leadership right, what we do is we create a solid, safe workplace culture. If we get it wrong, we create a toxic workplace culture because we are not upholding the values and standards of that business and that team. So let's start to look, where did it all go wrong? Well, if we go back to the start of the Industrial Revolution, we had people who had to turn up at work at whatever time it was that the factory said they were going to start working, because they got a steam engine, and that steam engine would need to be lit and produce enough steam and enough pressure so that when they pulled the lever, all of the looms, all of the things, all the machines would start working. So everybody had to be sat down ready to go. This is why we had clocking in, clocking out, and we had titles such as bosses, managers, and supervisors. So the boss was the factory owner. He would stand up in his big office and overlook all of the workers, the staff. And these are old school languages that I'm using. And he would overlook all of these people and make sure that they were earning money for him. But he couldn't look after all of these people. So what did the boss have? The boss would then have managers. Managers would be responsible for managing output, managing resources, managing people. But they couldn't keep an overview of everybody, so they had to break it down into smaller bite-sized chunks. And that's where the supervisor came in. The supervisor was responsible for making sure that parts of the factory were running effectively, and this is how we ended up with a leadership hierarchy. And this all started in 1780. Let that sink in for a little bit. We're still using language from 1780, which was the start of the Industrial Revolution. We still use language such as bossing, managing, supervising. I'm sure you sometimes describe your leadership as, yeah, the boss is really nice here. I like working for him, or I like working for her. She's a great boss. Nobody uses the word leader. It's something that's become part of our vocabulary, and it's something that we need to change. But it's not just about changing language, because here we are in the 2020s, where we are in industrial revolution number 5, and this is all about personalization and humanization. And if we don't get it right, if we don't get this right, because this is what the workforce is screaming out for, personalization and humanization. As a leader, if we are not getting this right, if we are seeing people as human doings rather than human beings, that creates stress. Stress creates a loss of productivity. Loss of productivity creates micromanaging. Micromanaging creates a them versus us society. A them versus us creates gossip and tittle tattle. That then leads to frustration. That leads to that bad day at work. You bring it home and so on. And this is where it all started back in 1780. But we have not evolved our leadership style to meet the demands of the modern day world. So, why would people put up with old school bosses and managers, supervisors who just have no idea how to deal with human beings, how to understand, to be emotionally intelligent? Why would people put up with this sort of behavior in 2024, 2025, and beyond? They won't. That's the simple answer. They won't. Of course they won't. Why won't they? Because there's so many opportunities out there. Remember, 384,000 jobs available. It's a smorgasbord of choice. And this is what we're starting to see. I call it the Goldilocks effect. People are out there now. They are trying on jobs. They are trying on workplace cultures. And this is why we see that merry-go-round and people jumping off all the time. What we need to do is, when we create a good workplace culture, and we do this through our leadership, we do this through our influence. And this isn't solely the responsibility of the leadership team. This is also the responsibility of team members to be able to create this cohesive, this safe work environment where we are all moving towards the common goal, where we have an emotionally fulfilling experience in the workplace. We will want to stick around. We will want to stay in that sort of environment. It's like any relationship where you feel seen, heard, cared for, validated, safe. You're going to stick around. You're going to want to be part of that. But if you're not feeling any of those in a relationship, you start to look elsewhere. You start to think, hang on, there's got to be more to this. And you start looking elsewhere and you move away. And that's what happens in the workplace. So, who pays for all of this? Who pays for this churn in the workplace? What's it actually costing? Well, research shows that on average, a re-recruitment is a minimum of a third of the annual salary. So I'm rubbish with maths. So let's say the annual salary is $90,000. To re-recruit somebody who's just upped and left, it's going to cost the business a minimum of $30,000. That is a truckload of money. I've even met a business owner who told me that they've got a re-recruitment budget. And we worked out that their re-recruitment budget was about $150,000. And I said to them, I said, what if you were actually able to retain those people? What if you were able to upskill your leadership skills, because that person was the problem, but also the leadership skills within your team? What if you were able to create a good workplace culture where people would want to stay, where they felt safe, where they felt important, where they felt significant and had an active role to play in that team? What do you spend that $150,000 on? Because to be able to change that, trust me, is not going to cost $150,000 in coaching. Might cost you $7,000 or $8,000, but what could you spend that, let's say, that remaining $140,000 on? You could buy new equipment. You could maybe enhance your marketing. You might be able to streamline some things, but you'll be able to use that to be able to grow the business and employ more people, make more money. But all the time you're shelling out, and this person had $150,000 for a re-recruitment budget. I'd never heard of anything in my life like that, but it seems to be a common thing out there. So when we start to think about it, what's the cost? We've already looked at the cost at the start of the presentation in what that happens with communities and families. But we're talking about money here as well. So I think it's time for change. We need to have this leadership revolution. And what I want to share with you is a new leadership principle. And I believe we're well overdue this. Thinking 1780 to 2020, I think we are well overdue. So, as I said, Industrial Revolution number 5, 2020, personalization and humanization. It's all about people-centric leadership. It's all about putting people first. Now, whenever I mention this, I get a collective groan. In actual fact, I ran my own international leadership conference in 2024. And when I stood up and said, today we're going to talk about leading with love, we're going to be talking about people-centric leadership, there was a collective groan that went around the room. And I even heard words like, oh God, not this hippie shit, not this bullshit, not this tree hugging. Oh, it's all this soft stuff. Well, this soft stuff is what makes the difference. But I want to prove to you today that this type of leadership is not something new. It's not new age. This has been around for centuries. It's just that we got stuck in a rut with this boss, manager, supervisor mentality. Do as you're told, otherwise you're going to get a punishment. Do as you're told, otherwise you're not going to get paid. Do as you're told, otherwise you're going to lose your job. We are living in 2025. There's got to be a better way. There really has to be a better way. So, this was really interesting when I first put this slide up. I understand what this is because of my generation. This is the DeLorean from Back to the Future, which they turned into a time machine. Now, when I've shared this with younger audiences, they go, what's that? So for anybody who doesn't know, this is a time machine. And we're now going to jump in our time machine and we are going to go time traveling. So I want you to grab your steering wheel. Come on, get your hands up. You might just be watching this on Zoom, or you might be watching this at home or in your office, but I want everybody to grab their steering wheel because we're going to drive the DeLorean. We're going to go time traveling. We're going to hit 88 miles an hour, which is going to generate 1.5 kilowatts of power, whatever gigawatts of power it was, I think. And we're going to go boom, and we're going to go back in time. Are you ready? Have you got your DeLorean ready to go? All right, you ready? 1, 2, 3, poof, here we are. We are back in time. It's 1805. Now, who's this gentleman? Does anybody know who he is? This is Vice Admiral Nelson. He's in charge of the British naval fleet. And it's 1805, and England is at grave risk of invasion. Now, you're probably thinking, what has this got to do with leadership? Well, I'm going to show you that leading with love is very tough. And it's a very strong and resilient, but very authentic and caring way to be able to lead. And Nelson was fantastic at it. So we are now part, you and I are now part of the biggest naval battle ever up to 1805. And we're on the team on the left. We're part of the British team. We got 27 ships, 2,148 guns and 17,000 men. However, we are fighting not only the French, but also the Spanish, because they had to gang together to try to beat us. And they're under the direction of Vice Admiral Villeneuve. They've got 33 ships. That's 6 more ships than us. Now, in a naval battle back in 1805, 6 more ships was a massive advantage. They've got nearly 500 more guns than us, and they've almost doubled the amount of men on their boats. So we are pretty much up against it. Now, if we do not win this battle, then the French and the Spanish will be able to invade our country. And I will no longer be speaking English. I will now be speaking French. Oh, and I'll be eating the French frog's legs. Oui, très bien. See, I'm not very good at French, so you can tell we won the battle. But let's not spoil the end. All right. Also, I want you to meet Little Johnny. Little Johnny is an effective part of our team. Now, the thing about little Johnny is he's a powder monkey, and his role is critically important in this battle. Now, back in the day, cannons were fired using gunpowder. Now, we didn't want to have a truckload of gunpowder piled up on the deck behind the cannons so that they could keep firing, because one stray shot, one stray spark would set that gunpowder off and it would blow the ship to kingdom come. So what we've got is we've got the armory down in the whole of the ship. It's very safe. It's right in the middle of the ship and it's surrounded by lead. And little Johnny, in actual fact, each ship probably had about 20 little Johnnies. They would run around with these kegs that you see here, just like a flask, full of gunpowder. And they would provide the gunpowder to the cannons so that the cannons could fire. But even more than this, little Johnny was also responsible for running communication around the ship and telling people what to do. He was passing information back and forth. He was also responsible for getting into the nooks and crevices and the holes so that they could repair them, because little Johnny is only 14. This is the age that I've given him for this presentation. In reality, he was more like 11 or 12 years old. And little Johnny was not getting paid. The life in the Royal Navy was actually better and safer than living on the streets as what they would call an urchin back in those days. It was safer for him to be on board because he would get 3 square meals a day. He would have a life of adventure, but he's also learned a skill and a trade. Now, little Johnny would run around delivering gunpowder, fixing holes in the ship, sharing tactical messages to the commanders on board, but he would also be responsible for first aid and triaging of casualties and helping get them to the sick bay. Little Johnny was an integral part of the team, and yet he was only 14 years old. So let's talk about these traditional naval battles that they had back in the day. Basically, they were pretty normal, basic, simple ways. You park your ship alongside somebody else and you let them have it, because your guns are all down the side of the ship. It was called broadsiding. But it was basically whoever could loose off as many cannonballs and some shots and then board the other ship and win, or sink the other ship and win, who would win the battle. It was pretty brutal. It was pretty basic, but that's how traditional naval battles were fought. Now, most of the battles were coordinated by the admiral who was on the flagship. That's why we called them flagships. HMS Victory was a flagship. And they would run flags, different flags, as you see, up and down the main masts. Now, this is how they would coordinate the battle. So the admiral would be in charge of the battle, and he would signal each of the ships in his fleet with different flags telling them what to do. So the captains would then follow the directions of the admiral and carry out the battle. And the admiral, the flagship, that was where all the decisions were made. The captains then did as they were told. So this was the principle behind most battles back in 1805. Now, as I said, Nelson and the British were massively outgunned. Now, the tradition is that normally the fleet would sail alongside and they just battle it out. But because we were 6 ships short, Nelson went back in history and thought, how have we fought these battles before? And he came up with a strategy that had been used successfully before, and that was to split the French and Spanish fleet. So what they did was they sailed directly into the French and Spanish fleet, and then this arm would peel left and this arm would peel right. Now, doing this meant that the fleet was not as exposed to broadsiding. But even more than this, and this was the real crux of the situation. Remember what I said about the admiral controlling the battle via the flags and the captains doing as they were told. Well, this is HMS Victory here. This is our ship. This is what Nelson is on. This is where little Johnny is. But this is the French flagship here, Bucentaure. I think I probably pronounced it incorrectly, but anyway, this is their French flagship. Now, as you can see, the British are going to sail along, and the idea was to unleash as much damage on this ship as they passed by and took their positions up for the rest of the battle. The idea was to take out the flagship. Because if they take the flagship out, then Villeneuve, who was the vice admiral in charge of the French and Spanish fleet, would not be able to communicate to his captains what to do in the battle. The captains would flounder, they would panic, and it would be absolute chaos. Now, the British fleet decided that they were going to train their captains to be able to fight their own battles. And this was the final command that Nelson gave his captains before the battle the next day. No captain can do very wrong if he places his ship alongside that of the enemy. That was pretty much his final command. Now, if I was a captain back then, I would have been like, huh, geez, thanks, boss. Nice one. You just want us to park ourselves alongside the enemy and let them have it. All right, have you got any other tactics? Any other ideas? And that was pretty much the battle plan. But Nelson had an ace up his sleeve. He trained his captains. He trained his crews. Every man knew their job. They didn't need flags. They didn't need to be told what to do, unlike the Spanish and the French fleet. They were waiting on directions from their boss. Nelson turned every person on board every British ship into a captain. And they all knew exactly what they had to do, and they all had their own areas of responsibility. But even more than that, they were cross-trained. So come the day of the battle, when all hell is breaking loose, and this is the day of the battle, the British had the upper hand. And here's little Johnny running around doing his thing. But I want you also to consider moving these ships. These are massive leviathans of things. Not only is a battle raging on, but we've got to maneuver and still sail this ship. Over 3,500 tons worth of wood is floating around. 200 foot long of rope, 200 foot long in length, 27 miles of rope, 800 men, over 100 cannons, and 4 acres of sailcloth. That's going to take a hell of a lot of maneuvering. So not only do the crews have to be so highly trained that they can fight a battle, but so that they can still sail and navigate the ship into the right position. So anyway, the battle's continuing, war is raging, and then early in the afternoon, Nelson takes a critical shot. He gets shot in the shoulder from a sniper up in one of the French or Spanish ships. Now he knows that this wound is going to kill him, but he's determined to see out the battle because he wants to know if his tactics are won or not. So the battle rages on, and we can see the battle here, and we can see Nelson with his officers surrounding him. But the battle's raging on, and the captains are doing their best. They are fighting their own battles. They've been given the autonomy, they've been given the control, they've been given the training to be able to run the battle themselves. The French and the Spanish are in absolute discord because their flagship has been taken down. They don't know what's going on. They're just doing the best they can, but they haven't experienced this before and they're not trained for it. So there's absolute chaos and carnage going on. But eventually, around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we are triumphant. We win. Britannia wins. It's one of the most decisive and glorious naval victories, all because of Lord Nelson. Not long after the Spanish and French have surrendered, Nelson passes away. But look at the stats. Look at the figures here. We lost no ships. French and Spanish had 21 of their ships captured. 1 sunk, and the rest of them ran away. But look at the casualties. We had 458 men killed against the French and Spanish 4,000 plus killed, and almost half the number injured. It wasn't just a victory. It was an amazing victory based on the fact that we were massively outgunned, outshipped, and outmanned. Now, you'll be pleased to know that Johnny, the little powder boy, was safe. He came through the battle. He had a few cuts and bruises, but he ended up being safe, and he went on to have a full career in Her Majesty's Navy. So, there's always a good end to every story. But let's look at how the battle was actually won. It was won years before, because Nelson spent years training his captains. Nelson actually was renowned for going around the fleet and training his captains one-on-one. But even more than this, he didn't just train his captains, he told his captains to go and train their crews. And their crews would repeat drills over and over and over and over again until they got it right. They became the best navy in the world because of Nelson's leadership. He put his people before himself. He put his people in charge of the battle. He trusted his people. He consistently showed trust in his men. And this is why people like little Johnny, the powder monkey, wanted to be part of the British Navy rather than live on the streets. But even more than this, he didn't just empower them. I hear this phrase all the time in leadership. Oh, I empower my people. Very good. Empowerment is just telling people they can do it. You have to train, you have to equip them, then tell them that you believe in them, then show your commitment to them by allowing them to follow through. That's where the true empowerment is. Nelson did this with every single member of his crews within his fleet. He was an outstanding leader and he led with love. So, jump back in your DeLorean because we can't stay in 1805 all day. We've got to get back and we've got to finish this presentation. So, get back in your DeLorean. Poof, here we are back in the modern day world and we are going to start looking at people centric leadership. How do you become more people centric with your leadership? Well, first of all, we have to not only take responsibility for ourselves, but we have to give responsibility to other people. Once we start to relinquish our responsibility onto others and we train them, which is the next one, we're open to ideas and there's training and recognition. There's training. I knew it was in this slide somewhere. But we open up to new ideas. We give recognition for people coming up with new ideas, but we give them training. Then we end up with success. This is how we start to look at it. We look at our people as human beings, not human doings. Because human doing is just a part of the machine. It's just another cog. It's back in 1780 when the Industrial Revolution started. We've got human beings now. They want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to have autonomy. I hear all the time, the younger generation want to run before they can walk. Well, do you know what? When I was their age, I wanted to run before I could walk. But I got given some lessons in life, from life, sometimes from workplace situations, which made me realize that I needed to learn and grow and move into there. But my ideas were squashed and pushed down. And that growth curve took a long time. Well, now people want to accelerate that, especially with all the information that we have online. So we need to start thinking about how do we do this? How do we become more people-centric? How do we release the control of being the boss, the manager, the supervisor? I'm in charge of this bit. This is my project. How do we release that? Because when we hold on to that information, when we hold on to that belonging, information stops flowing. Things go wrong. Frustration grows. And we go back to the first slide, that ripple effect. So, what can you do today? So this is what I want you to start to think about. And like I say, you don't have to be in a leadership role or a responsibility to do these things. Equip and empower. Share what you know with somebody who doesn't know what you know. Share with them how to do it. Cross-train them. Support them. Answer their questions. There was a phrase, knowledge is power, power's the bomb. I've got the knowledge, you don't need to know. Well, things have changed. People want to know. People want to know more so that they can grow. I can't even think of the word. There's this desire, there's this passion to learn more, to grow more than we've ever had because of the advent of the internet. Information's so readily available out there. We can learn anything. So you can help somebody through what you know, through your experiences. So equip and empower them. Lead with love. I know this sounds weak and namby-pamby, but it is not. It's a very strong place to lead from. We listen, we observe, bring a little bit of vulnerability. Vulnerability is not showing your weakness. It's not showing that you're incompetent. It's just showing that you're a human being. It's being integral. It's being honest. I don't know everything. I make mistakes. I've made a couple of mistakes in this presentation. Have you seen me go back, rewind, and redo it again? No, they're just there. It's just who I am. Yeah? But people are more likely to engage with real human beings, not human doings, where everything's perfect. People will engage with you. And that's the E, engage. Because as a leader, if we're going to connect with people authentically, if we're going to be able to lead them, we have to listen to them. We have to observe them. We have to bring a level of vulnerability and we have to engage with them. Leadership is love. Now, when I say this, think back to Nelson. Did Nelson listen? Did Nelson observe? Did Nelson bring some vulnerability? When he got shot, he didn't say, take me down to six quarters. I don't need my men seeing me laying on the deck almost dying. He didn't do that. He was like, I want to be here. I want to see the victory. I believe in my men. I believe in the battle. He engaged. He was one of the most well-renowned admirals in the naval history because he used to go out and meet everybody. He would go and sit and talk with Johnny, the powder monkey. The vice admiral of the fleet would go and talk to a 14-year-old powder monkey. Why? Because he believed in his people. He cared about his people. It won one of the most decisive naval battles in the history of naval warfare. Leading with love is not weak. And the other thing that we can do is we can be green and growing. When I talk about green and growing, I mean learning, developing, working out how to get better at something rather than becoming ripe and rotting. When we're ripe and rotting, we know it all, or we think we know it all. We come across as arrogant. We come across as, I don't need to learn anything new. I know it all. You don't know it all. Nobody knows it all. But if we're green and growing, one of the things that I find whenever I learn something new is I want to share it with somebody. I'm like, hey, guess what I learned today? Guess what I discovered today? And I want to share it with somebody. So therefore, if I'm sharing it with somebody, maybe they don't know about it either, and they become green and growing, and they learn and they grow as well. We come back to equipping, empowering. If you follow these three simple strategies, it doesn't matter whether you have a leadership role or not. You do this in your family, you do this in your friendship circle, you do this in your team, you do this in your community, you do this in your workplace. You become a leader because people will want to hang around with you. You suddenly become attractive to them. Why? Because you're helping them grow and develop themselves. You're also listening to them. You're engaging with them. You're showing them that they're important, they're valuable. This is not rocket science, yet it's a skill that seems to have been lost since the industrial age. And this is the leadership revolution. So, most importantly, if you take nothing else away from this presentation today, and I mean nothing, please remember this: you don't know it all. Nobody wants to listen to a know-it-all. I actually call know-it-alls two shits. No, I shouldn't swear, but I do. Yeah, because if you've had one shit, they've had two. They're always trying to outbig you in their story. They always seem to think they know more, but they don't. And they cause chaos. So as a leader, if you don't know, ask for clarification. Somebody will know. It's okay not to know it all, but be honest, be integral. So we can get upskilled. You can upskill yourself. You can upskill your team. Because if we learn, we lead better. If we lead better, we're constantly learning. Now, you don't have to get somebody like me to come in and help you. I had a business actually the other week. They reached out to me and they said, Steve, I don't think we can afford your services right now. What could we do? And I said to him, can you afford a subscription to Audible? Now, I'm not getting paid by Audible to say this, but it's a strategy. And they said, yeah, we can afford a subscription to Audible. I said, great. Here's a list of books that I recommend. Now, ask your team to sign, to download Audible and sign in with your group login, and then get them to listen to one chapter of the book each month, one chapter. And then you have a team training or a team meeting around that, and you get them to discuss what did they learn? What was the aha moments from that chapter? Then ask them, how do we implement this into our day-to-day organization? How do we implement this into our team? How do we implement this into what we do? Now, because you're doing this, you're actually engaging your team in enhancing and developing the way that you do things. This gives them buy-in, this gives them ownership. Even more than this, they're learning and growing as you're going along. They're listening, they're observing. You're bringing some vulnerability because you're saying, hey, this is all we can afford at the moment, but it's still going to work. And then you engage, you drive it forward. That's leading with love. All it costs you is a subscription to Audible for a year. If you need that book list, please hit me up. More than happy to share it with you. Because I know that some businesses, they're struggling at the moment. But your biggest investment, the way that you keep your people, is by investing in them, by proving to them that they're valuable, by upskilling them, the same way that Nelson did with his team. But even more than this, it stops the merry-go-round, because now you're giving them autonomy, you're giving them partly some of the control over the business, over how do we develop new ideas, new things. They're going to want to stick around and see that finish, just like Nelson did when he was laying on the deck, waiting to die from his bullet wound. Leading with love is not weak, it's a skill, and you can learn new leadership skills. Okay, so here's a quick win for you. I said I'd share with you something around the generations. So we're going to have a quick look at millennials and Gen Zs. So the millennials, 1981 to 1994, currently making up probably a little bit higher now, more than 35% of the workforce. So we're going to go through some do's and don'ts. Let me just move me over to here so I don't get in the way. Okay, so this is what we need to do with millennials. Now, I've presented this to hundreds of businesses, and I've had millennials in the room, and I've asked them, is this right? And they all go, yep, this is exactly what you should do and not do with us. So align them with the purpose of the business. What I mean by this is, what is the purpose of your business? So at the moment, I'm working with an executive team from a government-based organization who deal with the ecology of the land. They take care of animals, they take care of grazing areas, they take care of pests and controls. But their overall purpose is the environment and taking care of the environment. So that's the purpose. So you got the vets, you got the pest controls, you got the um, people who work out in the fields and the land. They all work together for the environment. That's the purpose. That's what we align the team with. That's what I'm helping them align the team with right now. Create opportunities to work collaboratively. Millennials love to work in small teams. Find ways for them to be able to collaboratively work together. If you haven't got this in your team, you need to get this in your team. Provide lots of exposure to technology, new technology. I hear it all the time, but they get distracted. They're always on their mobile phones. They're always on Facebook. They're always on Instagram or TikTok, or that's how they communicate. That's how they do it. I watch young people play um, games. They now have headsets on. They're talking to each other. When I was a kid, I used to go out on my push bike and hang out with my mates. That's because we didn't have, well, we did. We had Atari and Pong. There's two things going up and down. Couldn't really do that as a collective. But this is how they communicate. So don't remove it, encourage it. All right. Don't underestimate their capacity to work. There's a myth or a rumor out there at the moment about how millennials are lazy. They're not. They're not lazy. They want to work, but they want to do it in different ways to the way that we used to do stuff. So when we try to make them do it the old school way, they put up resistance. That's then seen as lazy. It's not. They're just in resistance to the way that we want it done because we're in resistance to changing. Remember, there's a revolution happening. We need to go with it. We'll either evolve or we will dissolve. Limit their growth and development. Do not put a cap on millennials. They are as hungry for growth and development as we were when we started our careers. They want to learn, they want to grow, they want more responsibility. And if we go back to some of the things that I shared earlier, that's how you can start to do it. And don't neglect feedback. The whole thing of performance reviews and doing them quarterly or annually is bullshit. They want information. They want feedback like yesterday. They want to know how they've done. They want that feedback. And feedback is not positive or negative. Feedback is a perspective from somebody who cares. Now, if you're a leader, you care about your people. Remember, you don't have to be in a leadership role to be a leader. Do you care about your friends? Do you care about your work colleagues? Do you care about your loved ones? Yes, you do. So when you share your feedback, it's because you care about them. You might have seen something that they haven't. But when we give feedback, it's a gift. Now, if everybody can start seeing feedback as a gift rather than as a criticism, and that it's okay to fail, suddenly we start to build a good feedback loop. All right, I could go into feedback forever, and I know that I'm really time limited on this. So, do's and don'ts with millennials. All right, let's look at the Gen Zs. All right, these are the latest out there. Which, like I said, we're starting to see the Gen Alphas. They're starting to turn up in places like McDonald's and Saturday jobs and working in hospitality. We're going to focus on the Gen Zs. They make up probably a little bit more than 5% of the workforce now. So let's look at the do's. Do embrace diversity. Okay, the Gen Zs are really across diversity. Okay, they want inclusion of everybody. They don't matter what color skin they are, what gender they are, who they identify as. Embrace diversity. Remember, human beings, not human doings. Old school thinking is human doings. See everybody as a human being with potential. Lead with love. If you've got blinkers on, I suggest you start to remove them now, because Gen Zs are not going away. Gen Alphas are even more across diversity. So you need to embrace it if you are in a leadership position. Provide them with challenges. This comes back to the gaming analogy. They are fantastic with challenges and working out problems. Why? Because they've pretty much done it all of their life through their gaming. Games are all about overcoming the baddies, overcoming challenges, and working out ways to do it. Gen Zs are brilliant at this. Yet because we believe our thoughts that they're not experienced enough, they can't work this out, they haven't got enough back knowledge or insight, they won't be able to help us, we just give them the mundane, easy jobs. They hate it. Give them challenges, watch them rise. See how they go. And provide as much flexibility as possible. This is a generation that were brought up on homeschooling, the internet, Zoom, all of this. It's actually been proven that during COVID, when everybody thought that people were going to be skiving off and taking it easy, that productivity actually went up. There's a lot to be said for possible with flexible working conditions where possible. No, it's not always available. If you're running a garage and you need motor mechanics and they're in there from 9 to 5, that's how the business runs. But if you have flexibility, offer that flexibility. It will be gladly welcomed. And what we start to see is, again, that leading with love, listen, observe, vulnerability, engage. What we start to see is that when we lead with love and we care about our team, they eventually start to care about us. Now, if we're giving them flexibility, it's the old adage. I'm part of an organization called BNI. This is where this presentation was done first. Givers gain. If I give you something, you're going to gain from it. But the law of reciprocity is that you want to give me something back. But as leaders, we have to give first. All right. Again, I could go on about this forever, but I don't have time. Don't limit their access to tech, just like the millennials. Don't limit their use to tech. They use it to be able to resolve these challenges. Don't limit their opportunity to learn. They're hungry. They want to learn. They want to get the experience, but don't isolate them. This is the biggest one about Gen Zs. Don't isolate them. They already feel disconnected because they haven't had the same experience socially because of their gaming, 9 times out of 10. They feel isolated already. So when they come into the workplace, they don't really know how to integrate. They're unsure, they're unconfident. As a leader, and again, we don't have to be in a leadership position as a team member. We can lead the way and welcome them in, help them settle in, help them feel part of the team. Don't look at them as some sort of weirdo just because they've got a strange hairdo or they're wearing weird clothes. Weird. When I did my international presentation, this epiphany happened. So I did my international conference, and I was writing down, people are wired differently. And then when I wrote the word wired, W-I-R-E-D, I went, hang on, that spells weird as well. And I think of people as weird because they do things differently to me. Why do they do things differently? Well, because they're wired differently. They've got different life experiences. So that's why they're weird. Well, they're not weird, they're just wired differently. So putting it through that filter helped me to be able to embrace more diversity, open my mind, become more curious rather than judging. So help people fit in. Go up to them, welcome them, take them under your wing. You start showing people you care about them, they will eventually start caring about you. Yes, it might take a little bit of time, but this is how we build good workplace cultures. This is how we build positive teams. And it's not just the leader's responsibility, it's everybody in the team. But it starts with the leadership, because if the leadership don't lead by example and don't do this, people will take the path of least resistance. We all do as human beings. We are innately lazy. Some people call it efficiency. I prefer to be real and call it lazy. We will take the path of least resistance every opportunity we can unless we choose not to. All right. Okay. So, very quickly, that was just a quick insight into some of the do's and don'ts with the millennials and the Gen Zs. So, let's have a quick look at some communication strategies and then we'll wrap it up. So, the silent generation, like face to face or written communication. Baby boomers, face to face phone calls and emails. Gen Xers, that's my generation, email, face to face, and collaboration tools such as Teams, Zooms, Asana, things like that. I'm only just getting my head around, got my head around Zoom, managing that one all right. Teams, still trying to get my head around it. Millennials, they like to communicate via digital platforms, instant messaging, feedback orientated communication. They actually get their phone out and FaceTime each other. I've lost count the number of times I see millennials walking around. They don't have the phone to their ear, they have it in front of them so they can see who they're talking to. Gen Z's instant messaging, video conferencing, social media. This is the platforms with which they like to communicate. Very brief oversight. I could go into this in much more detail. But I want you to remember, as one of my mentors would say, everything rises and falls on your leadership. And it is so true. Everything rises and falls on your leadership. And as I say, you don't have to be in a leadership position. If you are influencing another human being, then you're in a leadership role. So let's have a look at the ripple effects. If we get this right, if we get leading with love right, what's it look like? Well, and please excuse the pictures, they're straight off the internet, but we have high functioning, happy times at work. We go home feeling fulfilled and achieved. So therefore, we don't have stress. So therefore, our home life improves. We get to spend time with our kids. I know it's very twee and all of that, but it's true. Then the kids don't need to go to school to get their fix of significance. They go to school because they want to learn. If they're learning and growing, what do we end up with? We end up with a society of high functioning young adults, and it changes the way that our communities and our societies are. And it all starts with your leadership. It has to start with your leadership. So, moving forward, if you've liked this, if you've enjoyed this presentation, and I hope you have because lots of other people have, and you want to know more, There's heaps of free resources. You don't have to go in and use my services, but you can go in and listen to the podcasts. I've even written a book, 101 Audacious Leadership Tips. Here it is. You can go and download this in an electronic version or buy a hard copy. Again, I've priced it at an affordable price so that everybody can access it. It's jam packed with leadership tips. You can book a one-to-one with me and chat to me about leadership and things like that. You can visit my websites. You can go and listen to my podcasts and check it all out, all via this, what do they call it? QR code. See, I told you, modern technology, even I struggle to keep up with it. So, look, I hope that you found this valuable. I hope that you've got something from this. If you have, please go on and share this with your friends, with your team members, with your family. If you think this is valuable and you want me to come and deliver it, I will come and deliver it to your team for free. If I can't travel, I'll jump on a Zoom call and we'll do it via Zoom. But I'm more than happy to come and deliver this because the ripple effects, if we get this leadership revolution right, we're going to reduce a lot of the strain and the stress. If I can help upskill people with the new soft skills, the emotionally intelligent elements of leadership, the patterns of human behavior, then we're going to start creating workplace cultures where people want to stay, where they feel safe, where they feel seen, where they feel secure. And this is going to stop the merry-go-round. And we're going to be much more productive and we're going to go home happier. So, wherever you are in the world, whatever you've been up to, I hope that you've enjoyed this presentation. My name's Steve from Raw Leadership. It's been an honor to share this with you. Thank you so much, and I look forward to meeting you again. Until then, take care. Toodaloo.